Hello YouTubers, DIY Dan here, bringing you part 2 of fixing Big Red. In the last video you saw Big Red on the trailer getting ready to head to the body shop to get the frame fixed. Unfortunately, this body shop was unable to straighten the frame. They told me they couldn't anchor the car down well enough using their frame machine in order to get a good pull. After picking the car up, I began my search again on finding a worthy body shop. Believe it or not, I was having a heck of a time finding anyone local that wanted to do the work. Every time I would call a body shop to inquire if they straighten car frames, they would say, "Sure, no problem, we can do that." And then they would ask, "What's the make and model?" Before I could even finish the word Porsche, the person would cut me off and say, "Oh my God, we don't do those." I even tried pleading with them, telling them that the damage is rather minor, but they still wanted nothing to do with the car. After calling every body shop in my hometown, I decided to expand my search. I found 2 Porsche approved body shops in Michigan that seemed confident that they could repair Big Red. After talking with both body shops, I decided on Suburban Collision in Farmington Hills. I made the hour drive so their frame guru, Todd, could look over the car and give me a more accurate quote. Todd said he felt confident he could straighten the car out, so I left it with him, and we should have it back in a week. While Todd is fixing the frame, we need to get back to work on tearing down this engine. Since we have decided to do a full rebuild, we need to completely disassemble the engine so the parts can be sent to the machine shop to get repaired. We plan on having the bores nickel-sealed and new lower compression pistons custom made to accommodate the new supercharger. First start off by draining the engine oil. I then use a 10mm socket to remove the bazillion bolts that hold on the oil pan. These bolts should remove with relative ease, and if they don't, use heat to aid in removing them. If you haven't noticed, look how big the oil pan is. This car can easily hold 2 gallons of oil before the dipstick reads full, so be careful when removing it, as it is heavy. When taking on a project of this magnitude, it's important that you keep things organized. I use these sandwich baggies that can be found at any grocery store to keep my parts labeled and organized. These cheap little baggies are instrumental in making sure I don't lose any of the bolts or forget where they go. Now that almost all the oil pan bolts are out, it's time to remove the oil pan. The oil pan is a key component in telling us how well the engine has been kept. If I find sludge at the bottom of the oil pan, then I know the oil hasn't been changed. If I find metal shavings, we might have a more serious problem ahead. Thankfully, I found very little sludge, but there were signs of metal shavings, which I'll talk about later. Now that the oil pan is removed, let's get started on tearing down the front of the engine. I start off by removing the water pump idler pulley by using a 2-jaw puller. Now that the idler pulley is out of the way, I can now reach all the water pump bolts and start removing them. I ended up having to use a pry bar in order to crack the seal between the water pump and engine block. There are pry locations on either side of the water pump that allow you to pry it off without damaging the surface of the block. Make sure you use them if you need to. Next, I use a 2-jaw puller in order to remove the crankshaft gear. The crankshaft gear should come off with relative ease. I know for a fact mine hasn't been removed for the 10 years we have owned the car, but if you're having trouble getting yours off, use a little heat and PB Blaster to help remove it. Now I do the same thing to the oil pump gear. Next, I remove the timing belt tensioner. Finally, the moment we have been waiting for. In this section, we'll be removing the pistons, oil pickup, checking for crankshaft in play, and inspecting the rod bearings. First, I start off by using my 12-point socket to loosen the connecting rod nuts. These nuts are a one-time use only and should be replaced on reassembly. Next, I call in reinforcements to help me with removing the pistons and rods from the engine block. I was really surprised with how tight the piston and cylinder wall clearances are with this engine. I highly recommend you have someone help you when removing the pistons and rods. In this video, I had my dad catch the piston while I carefully used a rubber mallet to tap the piston out. Earlier in the video, I said I would talk more about the metal particles that were found in the bottom of the oil pan. Now that the rods are removed, I can better show you what I think is happening. If you look closely at the rod bearings shown here, you can see that most of the babbitt layer has been removed and is starting to show copper. I'm thinking the metal particles are from the babbitt layer slowly wearing away after all these years. Since the history of this car is unknown, I can only conclude that somewhere along this car's life, the oil wasn't changed like it was supposed to be, since we found sludge in both the oil pump and oil pan. With that being said, I'm really surprised with how well this engine has held up. If I had to guess, the car probably has anywhere from 160 to 200,000 miles on it. Thankfully, the pistons, crankshaft journals, and bores are all in pretty good shape. Now, let's check the crankshaft end play to see if we have any other surprises in store.
See, that's all the way forward, where it negative kind of slid forward just a little bit. So we got to add 0.01 to whatever the measurement is. And then if you go forward, it's actually 0.21.
0.21. So the tolerance is 0.11 to 0.312, which is, you're in there in the tolerance.
on the light.
Now that the engine is completely broken down, take a look at this oil pump. Notice anything? Yep, that's right. This thing is caked with sludge. Look at all that. Holy mackerel.
Lying down. The mother lying down.
Before I can send the engine out to the machine shop, I need to remove the studs from the engine block. Unfortunately, my tool for removing studs broke, so I'll have to wait until my replacement comes in. In the next video, I should have Big Red back from the body shop and an update on the wiring harness I've been working on. So long.